The theater was quiet in a gentle, waiting way, like the calm moment just before a rain begins. Soft lights glowed across the stage, warm and patient. The audience settled into their seats, some whispering, some smiling, some simply breathing and waiting. Simon Cowell rested his hands together, his face calm but thoughtful. He had seen thousands of acts. He had learned to listen not only with his ears, but with his mind and his heart. This was another audition day on America's Got Talent. Another act, another chance for surprise. From the side of the stage, a man walked out slowly. His name was Daniel. He was not flashy. He wore simple clothes and moved with quiet confidence. In his arms, he carried a small wooden box with air holes on the sides. The audience leaned forward a little. Boxes often meant animals. Animals often meant chaos. Daniel stopped at center stage and smiled politely. He placed the box on the floor and gently opened the lid. Inside was a chicken. Not a large one, not a colorful one, just a plain white chicken with soft feathers and bright, curious eyes. The chicken stepped out slowly, blinking under the lights. It made a small, calm clucking sound. A few people laughed softly. Others looked confused. Simon raised one eyebrow almost without realizing it. Daniel stood beside the chicken, his hands relaxed at his sides. "Hello," Daniel said calmly. "This is Daisy." The chicken tilted its head, as if listening to her name. Simon leaned forward slightly. "Daniel," he said, his voice even, "what exactly does Daisy do?" Daniel smiled. Not too wide, not nervous. "Daisy reads minds." The audience laughed louder this time. Not in a cruel way. In a surprised, uncertain way. Even the judges smiled. Howie Mandel shook his head, amused. Heidi Klum leaned closer to Sofia Vergara, whispering something with a grin. Simon did not laugh. He had heard many strange claims before. He looked at Daisy. The chicken stood still, calm, almost peaceful. "A chicken that reads minds," Simon said. "All right, let's see it." Daniel nodded. He took a slow breath, as if grounding himself. He knelt slightly beside Daisy and whispered something too quiet for anyone to hear. Daisy clucked once and took a small step forward. Daniel stood up straight. "Simon," he said gently, "I'd like you to think of something. Something simple. Don't say it out loud. Just think it." Simon leaned back in his chair. He crossed his arms loosely and stared at the stage lights. He was good at keeping thoughts private. It was part of his job. He thought of a word, then pushed it away. He chose another. Something ordinary. Something no one could guess. Daniel watched Simon's face carefully, but not in a sharp or intense way. More like someone watching the ocean, waiting for a wave. "All right," Simon said. "I have it." Daniel nodded. He looked down at Daisy. "Daisy," he said softly, "go to the answer." On the stage floor were several large cards, face down. Daniel had placed them there earlier without much attention drawn to them. Daisy looked around. She took one slow step, then another. The audience grew quiet again, the laughter fading into curiosity. The chicken walked past the first card. Past the second. Then she stopped. She pecked gently at the third card. Daniel picked it up and turned it toward Simon. The card read, "Music." The audience gasped. A few claps broke out, unsure but impressed. Simon's face changed slightly. Not shock, but interest. "That's interesting," Simon said. "But it's also very general." Daniel nodded. "Of course. Let's try again." Simon thought again. This time, he chose something more specific. He imagined it clearly, holding it in his mind the way he held opinions, firmly. "I'm ready," Simon said. Daniel crouched beside Daisy once more. He did not touch her. He only spoke quietly. Daisy listened, her head tilted. Then, slowly, Daisy walked toward Simon's table. She stopped directly in front of him. She looked up at Simon. Then she turned and walked back to the cards, bypassing them all, and instead pecked gently at a small bell Daniel had placed near the edge of the stage. The bell rang softly. Daniel picked up a folded piece of paper that had been resting beside the bell. He unfolded it carefully and handed it to Simon. Simon took it, his expression guarded. He read it. For a moment, he said nothing. The paper read, "A red buzzer." Simon looked up slowly. His eyes were different now. Softer. More open. "That is exactly what I was thinking of," he said quietly. The audience erupted into applause. Some people stood. Others covered their mouths in disbelief. Howie laughed out loud, shaking his head. Heidi clapped with wide eyes. Sophia leaned forward, her hands together. But Simon stayed still. He looked at Daisy. He had seen tricks before. Clever ones. well-rehearsed ones. But something about this felt different. Slower, calmer, less like a trick and more like a shared moment. Daniel, Simon said, how did you train Daisy to do this? Daniel smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. I didn't train her to read minds, he said. I trained myself to listen. The room quieted again. Daniel continued, his voice gentle. I grew up on a small farm. We didn't have much. Animals were part of our daily life. When things got hard, when people didn't listen to me, the animals did. They were patient. They were present. Daisy stood beside him, calm and still. For a long time, Daniel said, I felt invisible. People talked over me. They decided who I was before they knew me. Daisy was there during a time when I felt very alone. Simon listened closely now, not as a judge, but as a person. When you slow down, Daniel said, when you truly pay attention, you notice things. Tiny changes. Breathing. Focus. Intention. Daisy responds to that, not words, feelings. Simon looked thoughtful. He placed the paper down gently. Let's do one more, Simon said. Daniel nodded. This time, Simon did not think of an object. He thought of a memory. A quiet one, a moment from his past that he rarely visited. He felt it instead of naming it. Daniel hesitated slightly, then nodded. He whispered to Daisy. Daisy did not move toward the cards. She walked to the center of the stage and sat down. The audience held its breath. Daniel looked at Simon. She says, he said softly, that what you're thinking of isn't something you can write down. Simon swallowed. She says, Daniel continued, it's about a moment when you doubted yourself. And someone believed in you anyway. Silence filled the room. Simon's eyes shone under the lights. He did not try to hide it. That's enough, Simon said quietly. He took a breath, then smiled, a real smile. I don't know how this works, he said. And honestly, I don't care. What I do know is that this made me feel something. And that doesn't happen often. The audience applauded again, this time slower, deeper. It felt like respect. Simon reached for the buzzer. He paused, looking at Daisy one more time. Then he pressed it. Golden light filled the theater. Confetti rained down. Daisy clucked once, startled but calm. Daniel closed his eyes, overcome. As the cheers echoed, Simon stood and clapped. Sometimes, he thought, magic doesn't shout. Sometimes, it listens.